Hey YouTube, I'm Richard. Welcome back to the RPG Daily. Today, we got a special guest. We're coming on. You'll see her in a minute. It's Rachel Seeley from Girls Guts Glory. I've been following her antics in the tabletop gaming world, trying to create pop culture things in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's impressive creativity that I really admire. So we will get to that in just a moment. Rachel, welcome to the show. Now you're live, I think. Yes.
Am I live?
This is the smoothest technical setup I've ever done.
Yeah.
Everything is going perfectly. It's amazing. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time on your Thursday afternoon to talk D&D. Before we get into me asking you all the questions, I'm going to start with asking you a question. What is it you do? Where can people find you online? Like, what's your rundown?
Okay. I'm Rachel Seeley. You can find me pretty much anywhere at Sunny Seeley. It's Seeley. I'm on Twitch, and you can find me with Girls Guts Glory, where I am the DM most of the time. So on
Twitch, are you also running video game streams?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've been streaming a lot of...
Gate?
Yes. Well, okay, I haven't streamed Baldur's Gate yet because I had a time when I was playing the first Baldur's Gate game and rage quit a couple of times.
Okay.
But so we're gonna pull in Baldur's Gate 3 probably shortly, and I'm gonna rage quit through that, I'm sure.
Probably. I kind of already did about an hour in to that one. I'll get back to it. But then Solasta, have you heard of Solasta?
No.
It's like a direct competitor to Baldur's Gate 3. It's coming out. Oh. It's apparently a really good representation of the 5e rules in game form. And apparently they do it better than Larian Studios did. We'll see. I just downloaded it on Steam the other day. I haven't checked yet.
Yeah, send the name to me because I wanna play that.
Yeah, I'll send you a link or something, and then you can take a look at it. Because those games, you got to get them right.
Yeah.
You got to get them right.
Yeah.
Enough of the video game chat. We're not here about video games. Let's talk Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games. Tell me, when did you get started? How did you get started in this hobby? Yeah, let's start with those two.
So I have always been a nerd my whole life. I got started in D&D specifically in college.
Okay.
I had a group that was okay, and then officially started the whole shebang a couple of years ago. I think it's about 5 years ago now, when our first Girls Guts Glory show was. Oh,
has it been that long?
It was our short. I feel like it might have been. It was our short pre-recorded, like 15-minute segments. It was a long time ago. We were all, so young, so evergreen.
Oh.
But yeah, Girls Guts Glory was my first game. Oh no!
Oh no! It just shrank for some reason. Your video shrank, so now you're just a little smaller box. You're fine though. Okay. Sorry. So Girls Guts Glory 5 years ago. And
that was the inception. And now still Girls Guts Glory, and then,
And the rest is history, I guess.
The rest is history,
so about that part of it. Oh man, I tried to adjust. Every time I do this, I have technical difficulties, and this time I was like, let me just adjust the camera, and then it went back to, like, big screen. So now, but now it's fixed again. It's okay. For a second, it was looking at the corner of your wallpaper behind you. That's all.
My dragon?
Yeah,
my
your
official
dragon.
D&D art?
Is that what it is?
Uh-huh.
Looks like a dragon with, like, a lightsaber kind of thing going on.
So it like, cut the image, but this is the background I use for DMing. It's like a dude with a shield and a sword, like that. Yeah. It was just, official D&D art, and I thought it would be cool to... use old school art for my background.
Some of the old school stuff is better.
Right?
I think.
It has a feel. It has a specific feel.
It really does. what were we? I was gonna ask you something, and then I forgot because everything was breaking. Girl, oh, you were on other things. What are some of the other projects, like streams and stuff, that you've been able to be on?
A lot. I routinely forget. I was just talking to Erica last night, and we remembered kind of at the same time. We were on some zombie one-shot on Geek and Sundry for a hot minute, and it was just a thought that came out of nowhere. I've been on a ton of Geek and Sundry stuff. Overlight and Pathfinder, Knights of Everflame, and Tales from the Loop. I was on an episode of Critical Role's Handbooker Helper. I've been all over.
Okay. Yeah, you're all over that.
Everywhere.
What is that? Geek and Sundry. All over the Geek and Sundry and Critical Role world. So you've played a lot of game systems then.
Yes, I've played quite a few.
I've only recently got to try and play Tales from the Loop, which is amazing. Oh. It's a great game.
So much fun.
I'm playing a troublemaker who likes to stab things.
Oh.
And my party hates it, because I'm like an 11-year-old kid with a penchant for stabbing anything I can. It's pretty messed up. It's dark. So of these systems, because you said Tales from the Loop, Pathfinder, Zombie One-Shot, what is your favorite system that you've played? And this is not a D&D channel specifically, so you don't have any... Whoops. The internet has not been kind on that end, I guess.
Oh.
No.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Now we just... I was like, what happened? All right.
It's kind of why I was hugely into the idea of Girls Guts Free going forward in quarantine, like reporting things ahead of time, just in case stuff like this happened. And everyone was like, no, it's fine. It's never going to happen.
Well, now we know. Now we know. Yeah. The last question, what was your favorite game system that you had played with?
Ooh, I really liked Overlight, and I really liked the Tales from the Loop system.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to not like the ones like Numenera and what was it? Something else. Call of Cthulhu that utilize pools of points that you take away from. I tend to not like that just because I'm already keeping an eyeball on so many other stats I don't want to have to worry about. I only have 17 points left in this pool and like 5 in this pool. It's too much. It's too much.
Yeah.
I can do it if I have to, but especially for one-shots, I want to use a system that's easy.
I think that was something I noticed about... Well, Overlight I'm not familiar with. What is that comparable to Tales from the Loop, or is it easier, more difficult? Where does that fall?
It's fairly similar in terms of things that are not quite D&D. Like, you don't utilize a D20 for it. It's a series of specific D4s.
Okay.
And it's one of those games where if you hit a certain number on the die, that's a success. And the better you are at something, the more die you can roll. So your chances of having a success are higher.
Okay.
It's really fun. Yeah, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty simple.
That's pretty good. That sounds like something on that same vein of like it's easy to understand the roll side of it, and that's what makes the game, in my opinion, that's what makes the games complicated, is like understanding the rolls and when to roll and what to roll, which I really liked about Tales from the Loop. It was just like, I got 5 D6s, I'm just rolling them, and that's how it works. So, okay, that's interesting. So we had talked briefly before going live about your kind of penchant for homebrewing things, and with the latest season of Girls Guts Glory, I caught on that was also all homebrew. What is it you like about just creating your own stuff?
Frankly, what I like the most about it is that I can make up a lot of it on the spot, which is normally pretty much what I do when I DM. Like a vast majority, at least 85% of every episode of Girls Guts Glory that I DM is improvised on the spot. I know a basic A to B, and I feel somehow more comfortable when I don't structure it so intensely. Because I know I could lay out a very obvious plot hook that I think is obvious, but my players may not pick it up, and I can't hinge the entire story around them picking up that plot hook. I can bullshit my way around them finding it by just improvising it. So I tend to homebrew so that I know the world enough, and I know it's my own design, and I can't mess it up if I say this god is now, neutral evil or whatever.
Right.
I'm allowed to mess up my own things, and no one in chat is going to be like, as per, this guide in like 2004 on page 75. No one's going to come in and be like, that's incorrect, because it's my world. I created it.
Yeah. But that brings an interesting point. A lot of your D&D, like, since you kind of dove in head first with the start of Girls Against Glory and stuff, a lot of it's been online, and being shared quite a bit. Do you find that it is the same, like, playing online versus playing just like a casual home game, or is there definitely more you have to worry about when you're playing on something that's being published, so to speak?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to worry. I mean, at least me, a person with anxiety, I have to worry a lot more when I know other people are watching it, like any quantity above 2.
Yeah, I get that.
If it's just my game, right? If it's just like my group of people, if we're just sitting at home playing a game, no one else is going to watch, all I have to worry about is them having fun. But then you add in an audience that I think at one point our audience, when we had front page, got to like almost 18,000 people. I have to force myself. Yeah, it was
just a little more than 2. Just a little.
It was a day, let me tell you. When it gets to that point, when there's a lot of people with a lot of eyes on your content, especially speaking from just my point of view, when it's stuff that I created, I have to force myself to not read the comments, even if they're good, because I know that if I read a bad comment, and I usually read all the comments, it'll stay with me forever. So if we're doing it for a huge audience, that's definitely going to affect the after game for me. It doesn't necessarily affect like the story, because I think the story will work whether or not it's on air or not, because the point is still to entertain anyone, and tell a good story, regardless of if it's streamed or not. So the only thing it affects is my brain.
Yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming from with that. Like, comments can be bad, but they can be good. It's a weird area to walk. So I understand that completely. So now I'm just gonna pivot away from that, because that's a rabbit hole that we could go down for hours.
Yeah.
But I'd rather focus on something a little more happy. D&D. We talked briefly, or I mentioned, you like to homebrew pop culture stuff. The one I remember was we had talked about Dark Crystal and how great of a world that would be. What are some of the other things that you've homebrewed into a D&D environment?
Well, speaking of Dark Crystal, I created the whole system and everything. So it's ready. It's waiting. I did like classes and races, all Gelfling tribes and everything. So it's prepared. Just putting it out there.
Okay. Well,
what else have I done?
Let's see that.
I mean, I'll put it out eventually. I know I will, and I want to test it anyways. Anything that is interesting in the slightest, I want to bring into D&D, or a system that I am comfortable enough with to just, fudge my way through it. Like, Sea of Thieves. I've been playing a lot of Sea of Thieves, so I very much want to do a Sea of Thieves-esque D&D game. Very bad. Yeah. Incredibly bad. To the point that I've already started plotting the whole thing out. And I also, there's a ton of space games that I want to do, based on, more horror or serious sci-fi, like Sunshine and Event Horizon and stuff like that. There's a ton of things. I mean, literally anything that I love, I want to bring into D&D in some capacity.
So what is your when you're looking at pop culture in general,
Mhm.
is there something about it that sparks that creativity in you that says, I want to play this in this world? Is there anything specific, or is it just like everything?
Everything is definitely a correct answer, but it's also it's things that inspire, but also that are big open worlds. Stuff like Harry Potter, or even basic things like the Greek pantheon. Things that are so large that you could feasibly have a group of people living in it. Something that is very open-ended.
Yeah, okay.
And I feel like things that work well are stuff where you get like sorted in a way. If
Sorted,
that makes
like
sense.
the Sorting Hat, like that kind of sorted?
Like the Sorting Hat, but
Okay.
also stuff like what I see a lot of people do is like the children of the Greek pantheon, and you all get to decide like, oh, I'm like this character. Sorting in that sense, where you can find the archetype already in there, but you get to grab it and make it your own. Stuff like
Okay.
that.
Yeah. That just
Like,
makes
it's
me
Star
think of
Wars.
Percy Jackson. Yeah, Star Wars.
Yes, exactly. Stuff like
All
that.
those.
Stuff like Percy Jackson too. Yeah.
Okay.
That seems to be the easiest kind of IP to transplant into a TTRPG of any kind, but specifically D&D.
Okay, so when you have that kind of IP, that kind of world that has inspired you, what is your next step that you take to make it into a tabletop gaming experience?
The way that I specifically create is chaos. I have like 7 notebooks that are just snippets of different things. Like one page will be all this one homebrew, the next will be a different homebrew, and it's whenever something strikes me, I have to write it down. I will completely engulf myself in that media, whatever it is. Like for Dark Crystal, I'll go deep diving. I'll watch all the behind the scenes. I'll watch any piece of media associated with it. I'll read any book, any compendium of lore, any Wikipedia page. I'll go through it. I'll read all of it. Because I feel like the more I know about a specific world, the more I can then create something that is feasible and seamless in that world. If I'm going to create a god or a deity of some kind in the Dark Crystal world, the more I understand about it, the more I can create something that will look like it actually fits in this world, instead of like this, blue creature that comes out of nowhere and doesn't fit at all.
So do you
I do the deep dive.
You do that deep dive. Do you find that worlds that have a more distinctive style are easier to translate? Or does that make it harder, going off the idea of maybe wanting to break some rules and make it your own? Does having such a strict, visual or strict structure help or hinder you in that?
For the purposes of creating something new, sometimes it can help, but I don't feel like it hinders. I think the rules that a piece of media will set up, the guidelines already within the world, can help you create other guidelines, but also break those guidelines. If you know this is A, this is B, and because B is the way it is, I can break A in this way to make it still work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And that is a perfect segue into the other topic I had mentioned before we came live on stream, was the idea of breaking systems.
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons is a pretty straightforward system. I think a lot of people, we pick it up after a year or so of playing it, we start to fiddle and we start to mess with things, which inevitably ends up breaking the game somehow in our homebrew shenanigans that we do. So what do you have any self-guidelines you use when you're converting something to D&D to keep you kind of contained, or do you just let it run wild and make stuff happen?
I mean, I tend to just go wild. It's very feral, just get it all out and then organize it in a way.
Okay, yeah.
That feels like the very artist thing to do. But I feel like D&D is also such an incredibly robust system. There have been instances where I haven't known the rules for something specific because it's not in my 5 years. I've never dealt with exhaustion in a game. That's just all the DMs I have been like, I don't care about that, or I don't care about encumbrance, whatever.
Yeah, encumbrance is one.
Yeah, it doesn't serve the story really, unless there's a specific instance when it does. But more often than not, it doesn't add anything.
Yeah.
And I think the rules that I allow myself to break are ones that I break for the sake of story. Everything I do is for the sake of story. I love a good battle and min-maxing as much as anybody else, truly. I love to do the most damage in battle. I feel the most proud when I do that. But I'm here for story. I'm here to tell the story. I'm here to move the story along. I'm here to create the story. And any rule, a bunch of times in Girls Guts Glory, my players have asked me, can I do this? And I know there are specific rules in D&D that say, no, you can't do this, but for the sake of story, for the sake of cool, break that rule. Let them do it. Why not?
Yeah.
It's for the story. It's not going to destroy your game if you're like, this happens when you're blinded, and it goes against the rule.
Yeah.
The world is not going to end.
It's the rule of cool. It's that
the rule
kind of thing, which I've seen that with my players. If I let them run too wild with the rule of cool, then it's a mess.
Yeah.
You
have to know that line. You have to know, if they did this later on, would it break something beyond repair?
Yeah,
but
and
more
it's
often than not.
Anecdotal evidence of this is I have one player who wanted to be a rogue multi-class with a monk. But he asked me early on, he said, if I am a rogue and a monk, can I use daggers with my monk abilities? And I thought, yeah, it's a monk's weapon, sure. And then later I found out he meant, can he use daggers along with flurry of blows? And then it came up, and he had a magic dagger, and I was like, wait a minute, you're doing flurry of blows for 50 damage. That's exaggerating, but it was still just that's where you were thinking it. And then I had to, in that regard, because I was so confused, I had to pump the brakes and be like, wait a minute, let's revisit this. And then I was like, you know what? I just have to come up with bigger bad guys who are not as susceptible to a little dagger, And so that's where we're at.
If your players break stuff, you fix it in a way to, up the ante.
Yeah.
I've definitely... I have done that before.
Which
broken
is...
it enough.
It happened. I think everyone goes through that kind of scenario as they're running games. So now I got a couple standard questions I want to ask you. I gave you fair warning beforehand. Of everything that comes into running games and dungeon mastering, what is the one thing you struggle with the most?
I think finding the group balance is the hardest thing that I've ever found. And I mean that in the way that certain players work well with other players. If you have a player who's up to here, you have a player who's down to here, they can balance each other out. And sometimes I end up with a table full of players who are all up here. And that can be challenging if I, as the DM, am the one down here trying to level them out.
Yeah.
If I have a group of players that are all like, we're gonna go kill God, and I'm like, you're level 1. I gotta be the one to pull you down and say, you're gonna go attack some rats. That's what you're gonna do. You're not gonna go
probably
attack
lose.
God, all right? Chill out. You'll probably die. But also, I think it's all about creating a good, cohesive group of people and a team that specifically are able to call each other out in a way, but also to know, if I did this, it wouldn't be for fun. It would be to show off. Or if I did this, it would further the story. And also players who trust each other and players that I trust and who trust me is hugely important. So really, I mean, it's group dynamics all the way down. That'll make or break a game.
That's interesting.
It's hard to find a balance. Yeah.
That is one... Okay, so that's a problem that I know a lot of DMs have that, but it's from other reasons of maybe a shortage. I know from a player perspective, as a player, it's harder to find games. If you're a DM, you can almost always find players if you know the right places to look.
Yeah.
But sometimes it becomes kind of difficult of being like, not being able to pick the players. You just kind of get a group together. So do you have any tricks or secrets to help mold a group into a cohesive, balanced unit? If they aren't already.
That's very tricky.
It is, right?
It's very tricky. I, for example, put out a call on Facebook asking, hey, friends, does anyone want to play a Cthulhu game in the month of October? And I was expecting, maybe 8 people to reply, and I got 50.
Right.
So I had a whole pick of people, most of who I had played with, so I knew their playing style. I knew what kind of person they were at the table, because sometimes you're not quite yourself at the table. You become someone else. You become the same person you are when you're playing Mario Kart. And that's a specific kind of person.
That's a very specific example.
Yeah. That shows you who you really are. When you play Mario Kart in a competitive setting, it shows you who you really are. I have feelings on Mario Kart. Obviously.
I haven't played enough Mario Kart to validate that, but I will just go with it.
Trust me. Or literally any competitive game where you're playing with your friends.
Right.
That shows you who you
Smash
really are
Brothers.
at heart. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And that's a different person than like who you are with your best friend. But getting a group of people together who I feel like could balance each other out. It's helpful when you know the people ahead of time, for sure. That's the easiest thing. But if you I have a group of coworkers who I run a game for, and they're absolutely chaotic. Total chaos. It's pulling teeth, wrangling them in a fun way.
Right.
But finding moments in the story specifically where you can smack them with something serious, and it's almost always something you can see in their faces. They change and they suddenly become the character in the story, not just the character who's like chasing a goose or doing whatever. And being able to, for chaotic groups like that, keep up with them, be like, all right, we are chasing the goose. What happens when you chase the goose? Being able to keep up with them, but also being able to throw them something and kind of on a hope and a prayer, hope it affects them and pulls them together as a group.
Okay, yeah.
That's how I reel them in.
Do you have a specific example from a game when you've done that?
Yes.
Successful or not, it doesn't matter.
Yes, I do. My coworker game.
Perfect.
They pilfer everything they see, and they are the type of chaos that doesn't think of the consequences until I tell them, okay, you do this, here are the consequences, and they're like, oh, right, consequences. The consequences of my actions. Well, if it isn't you.
Yeah.
There was one time when they were chasing a goose, and I said, all right, you are literally chasing the goose. And this was going to be a very serious game. It was going to have a whole, epic storyline of knights and gods and blah, blah, blah. And they're chasing a goose through this forest. And so I went with it. I said, all right, you chase this goose to a temple full of geese. And they were like, oh, this is suddenly a little bit more serious because there's, an entire squadron of geese here. And in the center of the temple, I took their fun, and I was like, okay, let's run with the fun. And then we're going to take it down a little bit. And then we're going to take it down a little bit. And then slowly it became something is very serious happening at this temple that you've stumbled across. And then all of a sudden Baba Yaga appeared.
Oh. And
became a pivotal point of their story. And Baba Yaga, sometimes you have to power play your characters just a little bit if you have a proper chaotic group. And there's one of my lovely chaos players who talks all the time and doesn't expect the consequences of what he says. So having someone as powerful as Baba Yaga to just silence spell out of nowhere, really helpful. And it also very subtly teaches my players, there's a time for chaos. And for this game, it's most of the time, but there are some times And now they're actually really into it. They're actually into the story. We do have our chaos. We have our fun.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a serious story happening, which I never thought would happen, but we did it.
You did it. That is like...
Yeah.
I was gonna follow up with a question on how do you manage chaotic players, but you already answered it because I think that's a fantastic way to do it. And honestly, in my opinion, throwing a temple that is unexpected in anywhere is a good way to have them be like, whoa, what's happening here? Especially if it's full of geese.
Yeah.
That's something. That's something.
But like, if you have a chaotic group, you have to run with the chaos because they've already told you in that regard what kind of game they want to play. So as a DM, you kind of have to just go, okay, roll with the chaos. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's a good tip. One of the guys in the chat had asked me that in the Discord earlier. He was like, ask her this about this, and I'm like, that's it. Show's over. No.
All right, time to clock out.
Show's done. No, I actually have another question about DMing, and then I want to talk about being a player for a little bit, because I know you play a lot too, and that's something people are curious about. But first, for DMs, for brand new Dungeon Masters, what is your #1 tip?
Don't sweat so much. It can be, especially with an IP as beloved as Dungeons & Dragons, or honestly anything, it can be very stressful because you so desperately want your friends to have fun. That's the goal. It's just to have fun and to tell a good story. And you want those moments where, like, eventually you want to be able to build up and make your players cry. You want to make them laugh. You want them to have a good time. You want them to not look at their phones when they're on the table. And that's stressful. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I would say don't stress so much. When your players do something, it's the rule of yes and.
Yeah.
Stuff like, there's a goose. Yes, there's a goose, and there's a temple. You build off of what they give you, and you can still, whatever they give you, regardless of what it is, you can still put it in the confines of your world if you're smart about it. So just, like, relax. If I had known, I would love to have had someone tell me that. And I talked to Chris Perkins, actually, before this first season, and I was like, Chris, I'm so nervous, what do I do? And he's like, just relax. Just relax. You're gonna have a fun time.
Man.
Tell the story.
I imagine that was, like, very soothing. I see him, and he seems like just that nice uncle.
Yeah.
Like, the good uncle that you want at all the family gatherings.
Yeah, he's the good uncle
like
that is probably, he's probably also, like, a wizard of some kind.
Probably.
He's that uncle. Where you're like, oh, you're really cool and kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful human. I absolutely adore him. And he was incredibly helpful. All of my DM friends, I got advice from them, and it was all like, just chill, have a good time, and sometimes you're there to offer the problems. Your players will figure out their solution.
That's my favorite thing to tell people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that, when I learned that one, that was like a weight lifted off of my shoulders, because I was like, oh, I don't need to have the answers, I just need the questions.
Yes, exactly.
Throw it at
that
him.
one from Lord Mercer himself.
Oh, nice. I learned it from Matt Colville, from his videos.
Colville.
One of the Matts. There's many Matts in the
There are a
hobby.
lot of...
There's
so many Matts.
So many Matts.
Like the pantheon of Chris's. There's a whole pantheon of Matts out there.
There really is. There's like the different deities. Oh, we could go. Let's homebrew a D&D world that is the D&D hobby community.
Yes.
Incarnate, where, you know, you got the Matts and the Chris's and the
Done.
Jeremys in there, and
Done.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a rabbit hole. Let's shift gears.
Yes.
Let's talk about being a player.
Okay.
Because while it is fun and relatively easy to get into, I know a lot of people sit there and we watch the streams and we watch, you know, Critical Role or Girls Guts Glory, and we see how people play. And sometimes it takes a little extra work to find ourselves feeling confident in ourselves as players to be making those decisions and doing the crazy antics. So what kind of advice would you give someone who's just starting out as a player in the hobby?
100% have fun and lean in. I see a lot of players who, especially if it's their first time playing D&D, a lot of people have that very media-driven idea of what D&D is, and they're like, it's a bunch of nerds. You're there to have fun. Honestly, who cares if you're doing a stupid voice at the table? Don't be afraid to look stupid. They're the best characters. They're the most fun characters. But also, like, lean into the story. Let yourself be swept away in it. Be an actor at the table. If you're gonna cry, do it. Just do it. I get so tired of seeing players who they don't let the story affect them because they're not actors or they're not LARPers or whatever. And that's fine. Not everyone is that, but you can still read a book and feel deeply, even if you're not a writer. So why not just let yourself go through that? That's, I think, why a lot of people say that D&D is incredible therapy. You allow yourself to feel those things, go through the entire gamut of emotions in a campaign. Just let yourself do it.
That's very poignant. I can't even say that word. But looking at that, and yeah, D&D, we all know it has, therapeutic qualities and really is helpful in that case. Do you have any specific examples you're willing to share where you've let yourself just become, immersed in the story so much that it had hit that, like, therapeutic nature?
I'm not sure if it ever got to therapeutic necessarily, but there were times, especially in Girls Guts Glory, when I got to be Moira, where I got very immersed in the character, because she was my first D&D character that lived past like level 5, so she was very important to me. And then the way her story ended, I got incredibly invested, because it's kind of dumb, but it's almost like having a kid or a sibling. When you create a D&D character, this is it's your person for a while, and you know their background, and you feel for them because they've been through all this stuff, and you know intimately details of their life because you're sitting there living it. Which is very similar to being an actor. Like, you sit with the person that you're playing for a long time. You get to know who they are and how they are similar to you and how they differ from you and how they experience the world. And the ending specifically for Moira was very much like, I breathed a deep sigh, and I had to sit for a while after that, because it was very intense. And hopefully it's not the end for her, but we'll find out.
Can you fill us in briefly on what happened with Moira?
Yeah, so the last we saw of Moira, they were in a temple of Lathander, who is the god of one of her other party members, Fauna. And Moira became possessed and turned around and attempted to kill her entire party against her will. Yeah. And the very last thing, like the very last image, which was so cinematic, Kelly did such a fantastic job. The very last image of Moira is an angel of Lathander bringing a mace down right on her head. And there's a look of recognition in her eyes, which told the rest of the party, like, Moira's in there somewhere and knows what's happening, but can't do anything about it.
That does sound like something Kelly would do.
Right?
That's very Kelly. That's very Kelly.
It was so good. It was so, and she pulled me aside before the last game, and she was like, all right, this is what's going to happen. And I'd already known this is kind of the direction we were going. And we sort of planted it into the story, little hints about what was happening. And there's still so much that is uncovered.
Right.
To be uncovered, rather. But we figured out, like, she's going to have this boon. She's suddenly going to be basically level 20. She's going to have a bunch of these spells. She's suddenly going to have all these auras. She got in Path of the Ancients. There is the last thing you get at level 20 is this armor, and having that as well, she became so souped up all of a sudden. So they weren't just fighting Moira, they were fighting Moira possessed with this insane power, who had boons from gods and all sorts of things. So we prepared for a while, and I'd been sitting with this for quite a while, and finally being able to go through it was like, it was so nice. It was so good to tell that story.
And
I can't wait to get back to it.
And Moira was your first D&D character that you kept going for a while?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
She's the longest living D&D character that I've had. And honestly, so far, probably my favorite.
Wow.
She's very, very important to me, yeah.
That's an interesting thing that I had a similar experience recently. I'll share my anecdote. Much less, Kelly, I should say. Much less Kelly in mine. So I've been playing this character, Titus Borvo, for coming on like 4.5, almost 5 years, which you got to play in a game. We had you in a session. We should try to get that happen again. Anyways,
I would love that.
Recently, the whole party, we were in this cave, and I had been treating Titus with this attitude leading up to that of like, you know what, if he dies, he dies, whatever. I was kind of like preparing myself for, that was kind of my fun, is like, I'm going to do something stupid, heroic kind of thing. We found ourselves in this cave, and I got my leg chopped off, bit off. It was like a monster bit his leg, right? And I was in that moment when Kelly was like, your leg is gone. And I was like, and I had to like take it in for a bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect it to feel that way.
Right.
But then after that, I was like playing the character entirely differently. I was like, the party saw my attitude change, and they thought it was weird because I just had my leg bit off, and I was like, oh no, I like my character more. It's interesting. So it was like this fun kind of situation to be in, and like letting the game kind of impact me in that way. It was definitely a unique experience that I was like, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Interesting. All right. We have some questions in the chat we're going to have to answer before we wrap up. They have been asking lots of questions. Jack Grimble is here. He's one of my usuals on the channel, and he at one point said, oh, she's my new best friend. That was back when we were talking about pop culture stuff. So you have some fans here. First question, once I can find it, from Vagrin. What are some of your favorite aspects that your players build into their characters?
Ooh.
That's a really good one.
That is a great question.
That's a really good one.
I feel like most DMs, I love it when my characters give me a backstory and like they give me things that I can use against them, but to tell a good story. So I always ask my players, I'm like, what's your fatal flaw? What are your dreams? What are your fears? Are you afraid of spiders? Are you afraid of the dark? What is it? Because I love to see people confronted with the things that they hate or the things that they love, because that will change how you are in a specific setting. Yeah. I love to see that.
When they give you a backstory, how much backstory do you like?
Anything.
So like
literally
a 50-page...
Yeah. Oh, I'll read it. 100%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is where we are very different. 50 pages is a lot. 50 pages is a lot. My answer to that question, the one about aspects that players build in, I really enjoy mysteries and questions. Oh, yeah. When the player has, like, the backstory, right? I do like backstory, like, 1 to 5 pages for me, that's plenty. But I love it when they have things that they don't know, and they're like, and this mysterious figure, and I don't know who this is. And then I'm like, I can work with that. I can work with that.
I do enjoy that. I had a player once for a one-shot who said, this is my family crest, and it has this on it and this. And I was like, oh, okay. Do you know why these are on it? And they said, no, you can make that up. And I went, okay.
That's like, yes.
If you say so. Perfect.
And then their family is some evil cultists or something. And something to work with.
They were something, all right, yeah.
They were... Yeah, mysteries and flaws. I like that idea of things that they love and things that they hate, like, to seed that in there. I'm going to steal that. I haven't done that yet.
Steal it.
But I'm going to steal it.
Oh, please steal it. Yeah.
I'm stealing it. Have you ever played Mouse Guard?
No!
Jack Grimble.
I have not.
I've heard good things.
Would like to. I feel like I wasn't part of that huge chunk of my generation that got very into Redwall. And like Secret of Nim.
You weren't?
I know. No, I wasn't.
Redwall was my Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Like, well, I think I'm a little older, So, like, when Harry Potter was popular, I was too old, and that was not cool for me anymore. But
Fair,
Redwall was my jam.
Yeah.
But I never
feel
played
like
Mouse Guard.
I got very into old school fantasy, like fantasy printed in the 60s, 70s, 50s, anywhere around there. Like, I mean, I've talked about it before, but the Black Cauldron, Prydain, that whole series, very, very deeply important to me, but also very formative in the way that I look at fantasy specifically. I like to go and find bits of folklore and fantasy stories like that and take that in.
I'm going to write that down as a reminder to revisit, because I read that back in grade school.
Yeah? Oh, it's so good. I will talk about that series until the day I die. I love it so much.
It's oh man, that's a good point. The older stuff was really good back in the day. Let's see. Other questions. We have so many questions, and we're running out of time. Quick. From Daniel Yim says, how do you, as the DM, reach players who are unwilling to emotionally invest in a campaign, and is there any hope?
There is. I think there's always hope.
Nope.
You have, but you have to have a player that's willing, and you're gonna have to work. That it's always work. I've had a ton of characters like that, and one character in my coworker game who was straight chaos the entire time. You talk with that player, you see what do they want for the character, what are their character's fears, again, because you can use their fears against them and say, okay, you're terrified of dark, closed spaces. You wake up stolen from your party in a coffin, and you hear the sound of dirt being piled on top of the wood in front of your face. What do you do? And you have to have an understanding that they're going to react in the way that their character would react. They have to, at the very least, meet you halfway and react the way that their character would. So, I mean, start by having the conversation with them and be like, okay, like, give me more about your character so that I can use that against you to elicit emotion from you, basically. It's a growing process, and it's not going to happen right away, especially with people, like, humans are reticent to show emotion sometimes. It's going to take a long time. You just have to work at it. Chisel away. Yeah.
I also think there's a certain peer pressure that a lot of players will feel sitting at the table. Like, let me rewind a little bit. It's 5th edition D&D is the most popular as it's ever been, and players are invested, and I think anyone who comes to play the game, and you can disagree if you want, Rachel, but I'm right. Every player who sits at the table, I think, wants to be invested in a story.
Yes.
But they might have, like, a mental, emotional block being
they might have personal hang-ups.
I'm too cool.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I don't want to do this.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I keep saying, as a new player, you gotta lean in.
Yeah. Do the voice. If you are a new player and you sit down and you start doing voices in your first session, you'll have the best time. But I did have a player who was similar, who was like that guy who like wanted to be a little cool. He had never played before. He wasn't an actor, and he sat at a table with a bunch of theater kid friends. Like, he was the odd man out. And after a little while, after about a year of playing, now he's one of the more emotionally invested in the story. Like, every step that we go, he's like in it. And it just took some time, peer pressure, and they come around. I think. Yeah. They come around.
Time, patience, and making them feel comfortable. And I mean, it's got to be a safe space to show emotion. Yeah.
So you can't laugh at them when they do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And players, don't laugh at your DM when they show emotion.
Yes.
It's not
100%.
nice.
Yeah, it's not nice, but it's also like you're gonna have a crappy day if you do that, and your DM is gonna give you a crappy story.
Yeah, exactly. Another question, but I have to have a preliminary question. Have you ever dealt with trouble players at your table?
I have once or twice, yeah.
Once or twice. So how do you deal with the trouble players who might think they're better than other people? They might, try to control things. Do you have any secrets for dealing with those kind of players?
Ooh. No secrets. It requires, for me, a lot of empathy, willingness to sit down and hear perhaps another side to the story, communication, and also being able to have a firm hand. Because especially as the DM, your players look to you for you, because you're essentially the de facto leader, to create the space. So you're putting down the restrictions, you're putting down the guidelines of this is what we can and can't do at the table. And if you have a player that is consistently making the table sour, souring the environment, you have to be able to talk to that player and communicate with them as honestly and openly as possible, being like, hey, this is not appropriate behavior at the table. And I understand if you're in character, but you also have to realize there's a whole other group of people here. And you can't be that one character off on their own. You have to be friends at some point. And I think that that's another thing for players specifically. You can't just have the like terrible evil character who would never be with other people, because you have to be. That's part and parcel of the story. You have to like at minimum, you have to be a person who can work in a team, even if it's begrudgingly. You have to. Unless you want to do just a one-on-one game.
Yeah. Which could work.
That's minimum requirements. It could work.
But in that case, you could also just go play Skyrim.
Exactly.
Or
you could
Dragon
just play
Age,
any video game.
or any video game with those kind of choices. Mass Effect. Go be evil.
Exactly.
That works. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for all that. That is some really good advice. I always like having, hearing different perspectives. That is something I haven't really dealt with trouble players at my tables. I guess I'm very lucky in that regard. But like you, I always put communication and kind of, if there is someone showing signs of like being a troublemaker, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to say, kind of draw the line, so to speak, and show them where they can go and where they can't go in that regard. So that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Before we close out, let's recap. Where can everyone find you online, if anywhere?
I am on Twitch and on Twitter at Sunny Seeley, Seeley. You can also find me on Girls Guts Glory. I'm going to be on Probably Okay Games Saturdays doing a Star Wars game, which I am so excited about because I'm such a big Star Wars fan. I'm losing my mind. I'm so thrilled. I'm so excited.
What are you playing in that one?
You'll have to tune in to find out.
Okay.
She's like a smuggler Jedi. We're using a brand new system that one of the players actually created. So
nice.
We're figuring it out as we go. It's very exciting.
Very cool.
And you can also find me on Voidcat's channel, like the second Saturday of every month, playing a game called Occultation. I'm everywhere. I mean, look on the internet. I'm there.
Yeah, it's hard to escape.
It's true. I'm everywhere.
All right, everybody. I do not have links to all that in the description of this video, because I just found out about half of those things myself. But I will update the description so people can look in the video and find you in those places. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Rachel, for coming on the show and chatting and talking D&D. It was a lot of fun. I can tell the chat had a lot of good questions, and they enjoyed the input immensely. Good. And with that, everyone, thank you, and have a good night.